Good morning to you all. I welcome you to today's session, our last day. And before we begin the entire day, may I invite Hajat Zahara to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
A good, blessed morning to you all. I request we all stand up to have a word of prayer. In the name of the Almighty God, the most gracious, the most merciful, our Almighty Lord, most merciful and loving God, we glorify your name and thank thee for the countless blessings you endlessly shower upon us, for the guidance, knowledge, and experience. We thank you for the promise to be with us always, and we give thanks for your presence with us right now. We pray to you, Almighty Lord, that you continue blessing us with your mercy, you deepen our comprehension, broaden our thinking, and transform our understanding of what we have attained in knowledge and studies. For you are our perfect teacher and counselor, the enricher, the most wise. We pray that you strengthen us, restore us, and inspire us with your love and wisdom. Fill us with your mercy and blessings, so that we journey onwards in this life. We would pour out your love, grace, and wisdom to others. Verily, you are the Lord of the world and have the power over all the things. Amen.
Thank you, Zahara. Zahara is our PhD student, year 1, Makerere University. Can you clap for her? Once again, I welcome you to this session, and I am humbled to stand before you today as we collectively envision the transformative future for higher education. And our focus being a practical pursuit of an Afrocentric university, we are merely presenting a theoretical framework that will liberate us as members of these African universities as we center on the African experiences, perspectives, and knowledge systems, the challenging dominant Western epistemologies that are there to bring up those aspects that make us to waver or to deter from what we should be focused on. So as we focus on this, and this being our last day, I want each one of you to go away with something. What is it that you are going to go away with that will energize that aspect of decolonializing knowledge production in our universities? How do we reclaim that African cultural heritage? And how do we foster that inclusivity and equitable higher education? Those are aspects to reflect on, and I wouldn't want anyone to leave this conference without anything. Pick something that you will talk about, and you'll have people that are developing research areas. This should be a spark of element. So as we begin this day, I want to welcome Peter Chonzera, who is going to give us reflections on the conference day yesterday. Peter Chonzira is also our PhD student here to Makerere University. Peter, you are welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson. Distinguished presenters, our dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. Allow me to state that I'm humbly thrilled for this momentous opportunity to share the reflections of Day 2 as we continue to explore the themes of this ACUSAfrica Conference held at the prestigious Makerere University. Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that yesterday was a whirlwind of sessions, not forgetting the various opportunities for networking, allowing us to engage with fellow participants, exchange ideas, and form valuable connections. However, let us take a moment to reflect on some of the key takeaways of yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree that the keynote speaker's presentation was particularly thought-provoking. The title of the presentation, An Afrocentric University, Confronting an Ontological Oxymoron and Epistemic Dystopia, perfectly aligned with the conference's theme, which is leveraging critical university studies towards the practical pursuit of an Afrocentric university. Ladies and gentlemen, what came to my mind is the idea of an Afrocentric university viable? I came across the words of Ross. I quote, in her writing on what is a university in Africa for, she questions if Africa was produced as an object within Eurocentric institutions of culture, including universities, can the university be Africanized? That's a question for each of us here. However, David yesterday demystified this concept when he elaborated and clearly stressed that the Afrocentric university is not a modern invention, but is deeply rooted in the rich intellectual history of Africa, which is evidenced by the vibrant university academic life in pre-modern centers, such as Timbuktu, at the peak of the Songhai Empire. It is worth noting that in these pre-modern centers, knowledge was not only produced, but co-generated. This poses the great question of knowledge of versus knowledge for, a great anchor for sustaining a university as an intellectual project. Ladies and gentlemen, an Afrocentric university prioritizes African perspectives, experiences, and knowledge systems. From all that was shared yesterday, from the keynote address and the various breakout sessions we had, it is evident that an Afrocentric university is the one that centers African worldviews, knowledge systems, and values. Redefining education to serve African needs and contexts which is characterized by the following: an African-centered curriculum and pedagogy, emphasis on African languages, cultures, and histories, focus on community engagement and service learning, inclusive and decolonized learning environments, faculty and staff trained Afrocentric approaches, research prioritizing African challenges and solutions, and partnerships with African institutions and communities. Ladies and gentlemen, David provided the evolution of knowledge production in Africa using the case of the Great Lakes region. He gave us 4 periods, 4 episodes that reflect the evolution of knowledge production in Africa. The first episode being the end of 19th century, that's around the 1960s, which was Arab-dominated, then to the European explorers and missionaries. The second episode was that of the late 60s to the early 80s, where we had expert writings originated from the region, extended education programs overseas. The third episode of the late 80s to the 2000s, where we had a new generation of local academics, educated locally, but with visiting fellowships abroad. These engage in like-minded discussions with researchers from other spheres. The last episode, where David called us all upon to belong, the 2010s to date, where we saw homegrown African academics, fully trained in Africa, and eager to approach decolonizing the academic sphere and the quest for epistemic freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are called to be part of the first generation of researchers in Africa in order to change the status quo of seeing Africa as relegated to academic raw materials. Can you imagine? The concept of theorizing Africa being a raw materials for data collection should be changed. Another key aspect was the ontological oxymoron, a term which looked too vague. However, this term refers to the contradiction of trying to establish an Afrocentric university rooted in African values and epistemologies within a higher education structure that was historically designed for colonial and Eurocentric purposes. We should not forget that the education system that was given to our forefathers was designed practically for Eurocentric purposes, to which our keynote speaker referred to as universities midwifed by a colonial project of civilization. The question of roles becomes imminent now. Can such a university be Africanized? There is need for greater strategies and intentional objectives to Africanize the universities in Africa. There is a question: is it University for Africa or universities in Africa? Mamdan opines that decolonizing the curriculum means to reframing knowledge production to reflect African realities and needs, moving away from global frameworks that prioritize Western paradigms. We cannot forget the words of one of our gallant sons of the soil, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, suggests that decolonizing education means centering African perspectives, histories, and cultures amidst an inherited world systemic thinking that patronizes the Eurocentric university. The time is now, through the critical university studies, to unpack the contradiction by critiquing universities in Africa, which are often forced to maintain Western standards, curricula, and governance models as we try to attempt to assert our African identity. We need to advocate for decolonizing university structures to allow for the genuine development of Afrocentric institutions that can challenge these contradictions. Another term was the epistemic dystopia. This describes the chaos and the imbalance in knowledge systems where African epistemologies are often marginalized, regarded as primitive. The issues before us are great, but we should not forget that we are great men and women who can take on this mantle and realize the Afrocentric University, a dream that is achievable. The practical pursuit of an Afrocentric university requires addressing the epistemic injustices. The cognitive violence, the academic apartheid. We need to push for the creation of spaces within universities where indigenous knowledge can thrive and be recognized on equal footing with global knowledge systems. The critical university studies will provide theoretical tools necessary to confront these ontological and epistemic challenges. By examining the power structures, policies, institutional frameworks that maintain the dominance of Western models. It also offers insights into how universities can practically pursue an Afrocentric identity by promoting epistemic diversity, democratizing governance, and aligning research with African realities. Critical university studies will allow universities to rethink their role in society, challenge the neoliberal, market-driven approach to education, and refocus on social justice and development goals. Peter questioned the need to enlarge the room for participation. Ladies and gentlemen, in this quest to further the Afrocentric university agenda, we need not to play a catch-up game, but change the game altogether. Let us commit to the decolonization of the academic spheres through the rigorous pursuit for epistemic freedom. The battle shouldn't be a reserve only to the faculty. Ladies and gentlemen, we should all join and chase the dream of an Afrocentric university we build for the future.
Thank you, Peter, for that elaborate summary. Today is another exciting day, and in this, I wish to welcome to the front the one and only Prof. Suminku, who is going to take us through the Reconstituting Postcolonial Higher Education, Challenging Knowledge Infrastructures at the Limits of the Archives. Maybe just little information about Prof. Sue. She is the head of sociology at the University of Galway, Ireland, and a visiting professor in the chair for critical studies in higher education transformation at Nelson Mandela University, South Africa. She researches, teaches, and writes about human development, human rights, public goods, development alternatives, decoloniality, global activism and learning, higher education, and transdisciplinarity. She is a co-editor with Helen Kara, Researching in the Age of COVID-19, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and Qualitative and Digital Research in Times of Crisis. Prof. Sue, you are welcome to talk to us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sister Justina Maganda. Thank you for coming, colleagues, friends, hosts at the Center for East African School for Higher Education Studies and Development and Makerere University. Thank you for inviting me to this storied and beautiful campus. Something I've always wanted to, a dream I've always wanted to realize, to come and speak in this historic university. So thank you for the great honor, and thanks to all the partners, ACUSAfrica. Can you hear me? Is it all right? It's very... Speak to the mic. Yeah, okay. And before I finish all these things, I'm going to put on my timer. How long do I have in time? 25 minutes? 20 minutes or 25? 25, okay. I'm going to put on my timer so that I don't go over time. Okay? So yes, so thank you very much. And I'm just going to start. Yeah? So the title then, for this conference and its theme, Leveraging Critical University Studies Towards the Practical Pursuit of an Afrocentric University. Is the audio all right? Because it's very echoey. Yeah, it's good, all right. I'll stand a little bit away from the mic, maybe. So is to the reconstituting postcolonial higher education in the context of this aim of the conference that was set by the concept note, leveraging critical university studies towards the practical pursuit of an Afrocentric university. And the subtitle, Challenging Knowledge Infrastructures at the Limits of the Archive, might seem very wordy and a bit much, but I hope that it will become clear as I proceed. How do I advance the slides? Down. Sorry about this. The buttons don't work as normal when you're slide sharing. Okay, so I want to start by challenging our knowledge infrastructures, to think about the limits of the archives, thinking with the wonderful work by historians and archivists that was done in South Africa at the early stage of the post-apartheid transition. And at this point of time, scholars, archivists, historians sought to think of a more expanded and critical understanding of the archives, not just as special rooms with special documents holding the special records of history, but as the raw materials and deep resources for creating a social imaginary and the basis of knowledge production. So I want to think about the limits of the archives and to challenge our knowledge infrastructures in this beautiful room, the iconic reconstitution of the main building of the storied colonial university, Makerere University. And I want to reflect on the nature of archives even in a post-colonial situation. No longer colonial, but still having some attributes or characteristics of coloniality. And what are these attributes or characteristics? These are attributes that we see embodied and embedded in institutions, walls, and buildings like this one, which are so cared for, so lavished with attention, so carefully cleaned, restored, maintained, mopped, swept, polished, guarded, conserved, air-conditioned, lighted, and provided with every part of digital and technological infrastructure that we enjoy the benefits of today. What other characteristics does this have? The characteristic of trying to keep everything cool and conserved. A tendency, maybe, the philosopher and historical scholar Achille Mbembe says, the tendency to anesthetize the past, to make it bearable, to make it not so painful and difficult to feel, while maintaining this infrastructure. So the post-colonial institutions and states are post in the sense of being no longer colonial, but in some way they still are. They continue on. This post is an ongoing situation. And I want to think about the difference between post-colonial and decolonial. Post-colonial continuing on after that historical period of colonization, and decolonial being something different, something possibly more emancipatory and more reconstitutive, allowing us to think differently and imagine differently. And this is very necessary right now, because this morning, our colleague Peter has reminded us in a timely way of the difficulties and problems of epistemic dystopia that were raised yesterday by the keynote speaker. But of course, the dystopia that we live in is not only epistemic. This morning, we were only discussing on the bus that if you're not alive, you can't do any more things. You can't have more choices. You cannot dream, aspire, or reconstitute, repair, remedy, or heal. So this context we need to pay attention to is a very critical one, where there are enduring demands to remedy historical, epistemic, colonial injustices, but there are also very real pressures today on the critical social imaginary. And today I'll focus a little bit more on my particular area, the critical social sciences, because I think they are the main reservoir and the main educational ground for the social imaginary and for the public university. So the context we have is one of critical urgency for the public social imaginary in our separate countries, but in the world at large. And although these enduring demands for historical remedies are there, the critical urgencies shouldn't be forgotten. There are pressures right now on criticality itself, as well as on the social sciences itself. Voices are being chilled, are being politely or less politely forced to restrain and constrain themselves. Courses are being cancelled, redacted, taken off the course list. Staff are being laid off or being made precarious. And departments are even being merged or closed, threatening the very identity of our public universities as comprehensive educational and research institutions. Without the social sciences, our public universities cannot be comprehensive. Without the humanities, our public universities cannot be expected to lead us, our societies, in rehumanizing our history and our futures. And so we are in a world where we are permeated by something that we can only call an atmosphere, because it's so pervading and so lacking in definition as a phenomenon. We have to call it an atmosphere of control, but not in a good way, atmosphere of disinformation, even as information proliferates, and even the tools that we have to process information become subtle and sophisticated. We are in a situation of social polarization, of threatening political violence, and I'm going to mention it because it hasn't been mentioned so far, the ongoing colonial scholasticide that is happening not only in Gaza and Palestine, but in many countries where scholars are being attacked and killed. They are our colleagues, they are our academic family, they are part of our disciplines. We need to stand with them. As Professor Andre Keth said, solidarity and collaboration means solidarity and collaboration with our colleagues who are in the greatest need. We have seen almost 100 professors killed, 165,000 young people and children without education, every university completely or partially destroyed. This is the reality that our colleagues are standing with. So this talk is not about that, but I had to mention it, because it is part of what collaboration and cooperation are about. And I thank our South African colleagues and friends for bringing the case to the International Court of Justice to actually complain and say this is not acceptable to conduct a genocide. Scholasticide is one of the distinct and defining characteristics of a genocide. When they start killing our universities, our professors, and our students, and preventing them from studying, they are destroying the essential pillar that provides hope for people that the future could be not only better, but positive and transformative. And this is really the point where I want to talk about our declining ambition for global peace, for liberal global governance, and I would characterize this political condition as an ideological condition of liberal fatalism. What is liberal fatalism? You are being very liberal and saying, oh, this is terrible, and so on. But at the same time and in the same breath, or the next breath, saying, but there's nothing we can do about it. That is liberalism and fatalism together, combined as an ideology of inaction whilst our shared world deteriorates and our conditions for cooperating and transforming become lesser. Now to the limits of the archive. This is the point about paying attention to the decolonial, but decentering it because I'm speaking from the perspective of a very small country at the very edge of the Atlantic, a small white semi-periphery, Ireland. And what possibilities are there for transformative, inclusive, equitable, and good quality education in my little context that I can share and collaborate from? We can do experiments to decolonize the curriculum while trying to hold on to the center of our subject knowledges that are coming under attack and constraint. Criticality, the social sciences, humanities, and humanity itself as the liberal order disintegrates and global governance becomes fatally unable to do anything. So we're trying to hold on to the center of our subject knowledges and to decolonize. What we're trying to do is to exceed the limitations of the colonial archive, this archive of institutionalized materialities, of catalog cards, library collections, photographic archives, buildings, architectures, and their instituting imaginaries. The colonial archives function to produce structured knowledge. The structured knowledge was produced through processes of admission or exclusion, of conservation or neglect. These are processes of discrimination and selection according to some privileged status, some texts, some authors, some evidence, some records, while refusing that status to others, other texts, other authors, other evidence. So at the limits of this archive, we could start applying some decolonial knowledge strategies. We've heard about decolonizing the curriculum. So we can start this if we are in the social sciences, so the humanities, and we teach some courses like Introduction to Social Sciences, so Introduction to your disciplinary subject. You can revise the foundations. It could be science, it could be technology, it could be medicine, starting with critically revising the canon. In my case, because I teach sociology and the social sciences, classical social theory, which is the most classically Eurocentric of all the canons. In revising the foundations, it's not just enough to add one author, W.E.B. Du Bois, perhaps. We have to do it differently. And here I draw on the idea of double translation, which is a strategy for reconstructing theory, curriculum, reading, and thinking. And double translation, as the phrase indicates, involves two moves. The first is to recenter the margins. And here today in this conference last couple of days, we've heard a few good examples of this, excellent examples of this, how to recenter the margins. But recentering the margins is not enough. You also need the other move of double translation, which is engaging in horizontal pluriversal dialogues. What this knowledge knows, that one doesn't. All the different knowledges at the margins are not the same. They are different. And we need to engage productive and sometimes argumentative and very long conversations, because you can see this work is not going to be done quickly. This is going to be slow work. Engaging in the different conversations that are at the margins while bringing the margins to the center. That's what horizontal, pluriversal dialogical actions are about. So listening more, having more conversations, and having different conversations, so that we don't merely have the same conversations over and over again, and we don't make the same mistakes over and over again, but we open ourselves to the possibility of making different mistakes, at least. And in doing double translation and recentering the margins, engaging horizontal pluriversal dialogues, we should engage in something called reverse tutelage. Reverse tutelage is not about teaching. It is about unlearning and learning to learn, in the words of Gayatri Spivak. Yeah? So reverse tutelage is about bringing the wider knowledges that are there in our publics, in our communities, in all the histories that haven't been allowed to enter the archive, into a dialogue with the curriculum and with our practices to reconstitute the basis of our professional social science. And this is a very big piece of work that I'm talking about. And this piece of work is to be done in a testing and trying time, when we have to think both at the limits of our own ability to think and theorize. This is what the cultural studies scholar Stuart Hall called the theoretical limit case. What's the limits of our ability to think about something? And especially to undo the two structures that seem to zigzag our brains and distract us from one to the other without really resolving the question that is at the heart of them, which is what should we do about inequalities? And this is the zigzag of class and economic stratification, and race, and cultural and epistemic and ontological division and separation. So this is the theoretical limit case. How can we unthink, unlearn, and learn to learn beyond this limit case? And how can we test this case politically, yeah? in our analysis of the systems that we have, which are racial colonial systems of social but also economic stratification? This is in a long essay in his collected essays, volume 1, Race, Articulation, and Societies Structured in Dominance. So this is what the transformative agenda is really about. And I think if Afrocentrism is to do this thing of learning to learn, engaging in pluriversal dialogues, and bringing the margins to the center, revising the canon, we need to think about this problem of how race is how societies structured in dominance articulate themselves. But they articulate themselves in a way that distracts us and makes it difficult for us to address the main ethical and political question of what we should do about inequalities. Because race is about the distinctions that generate conflicts beyond economic and social class and re-articulated in different terms. But they just put different language and thought structures on the problem without solving the problem. And they feed liberal fatalism. Yes, it's very complicated, but we can't do much about it. So that's what the limit case is. It's the limit case of our historical moment, of the hegemony that still holds today in extremely pressurized conditions. And now I want to quickly turn to the pressures that our own institutions are under the limit case of neoliberalism, which has brought educational austerity even in the good times, even in times of plenty. It has got us used to the idea that education will always suffer cutbacks, even when our governments, my government in Ireland has just announced a new budget increase of 150 million. But this is in the context of the Universities Association asking the government to make good a shortfall of over 300 million. So they will give us with a small hand while they have been taking away over a long time with what constitutes a big hand. Right? So this is really something that is anesthetizing the past, reinforcing the state hegemony, denying the inconvenient past, failing to establish the real archives, the lost archives, the public archives, the community archives, and attempting merely to civilize through commemoration. I see I have just about 3.5 minutes left. So this is the test case for decolonial repair within the political economy limits of neoliberal higher education. And just then to begin to wrap up by contributing what I have from this small whitely periphery that I have come here from, Ireland. White and whitely, which is performing whiteness as if whiteness does not exist and is not a color, as if race is not an issue because we do not really have many people of different races in our country, and how this racial articulation is part of a neoliberalized and semi-peripheral position on the Atlantic. It's a white Atlanticist position, it's a European position, and it's what I would call a Catholic imperial position. through the institutional repression of the so-called non-normative citizens who are women and children and people of mixed race. And at the same time, we've anesthetized the problem of partition and bordering, which split Ireland into North and South, and mean that Professor Dina Beluigi and myself live in different countries. Although we are on the same island, Brexit and this general political problem has reopened those colonial wounds. And at the same time then, the unresolved crises of higher education, the funding crisis that I've talked about, which is a long-term crisis, which is constantly and continuously not addressed and not resolved. Okay, I'm just going to finish now with 1 minute on decolonial repair, which is too short really, because it's really where I wanted to end. And so decolonial repair, I say, is not exactly the same as those strategies that I've just mentioned. Decolonial repair is not just bringing the margins to the center, and it's not, no, go away, sorry about that. Decolonial repair is not just engaging in pluriversal dialogues. It's not just bringing to the center to the margins, right? Or the margins to the center, sorry. Right? Because it's not actually the margins business to make it to the center. The center must go to the margins and bring the margins to the center. It's not just revising the canon, because it's not just about our curricula. It's not just about storied buildings like this. It's not just about restoring the historical buildings and archives and their architectures. Decolonial repair is something more. Decolonial repair is about inclusive transformation and healing. It's about coming back to our history and arriving at a different point from where we departed, or what the poet Shemasini called the further shore. He mentioned this when he translated this play, The Cure at Troy, and he gave it to Nelson Mandela at the beginning of the end of apartheid. Right? Decolonial repair is about being historically reflexive. It's about beginning to exercise a speculative social imaginary that will incorporate the experiences and the voices from the margins and learn to learn from below and from across the belows. And it's much more ambitious than decolonization. Decolonial repair is speculative and fabulous because it includes everybody. And here I draw on, in closing, on the work of Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, the connection between Uganda and South Africa, but also one of the best theorists of how to undo the colonial racial historical structures as structures. Because this idea of repair will include not only the victims of violence and trauma of colonialism, but all the survivors in the scope of its collective transformation. And survivors include bystanders and people who were complicit without even knowing. So this is more than what traditional social science has ever tried to do. And because it is speculative, it needs our friends in the arts, in the creative arts, and in the humanities to creatively write, to poetically rephrase, to practice artistically, to musically reattune us and retune us to different ways, to offer different ways, to express the speculative imaginary of decolonial repair, and hopefully open avenues for us to begin to make different mistakes. Thank you. Okay, do I stay here? Okay. Apparently I stay here.
Thank you, Prof. Sue, for that insightful analysis and passionate delivery that is so significant in our higher education institutions. So I will allow a few questions. So we shall have at least 3 questions. And you'll be ready here to answer them.
Okay, I'll be
Yeah,
ready.
yeah. So, any questions? Come back here.
Ayanda has one, yes. Come. Oh, we need a mic? Oh, you want to come? One, two. Yeah. Is there a roving mic? No, come here. Come and ask the question and let's have a conversation. Yes, please.
Okay. Most honored. Thank you, Professor Su. Speaking about the archives and hinting about the situation of Palestine, I would love to think that there is maybe much information that is precious to us in, for example, the archives in Palestine, which has been lost. So how do we relate with going beyond the archive, of course, while we go ahead with the agenda of decolonization? Thank you.
Will I answer this question? One, maybe I'll take three. Yeah, come.
Thank you, Professor Su. My name is Dr. Isoken from University of Ibadan, Lagos, Nigeria. There is a trend going on in the universities in Nigeria. Just like you said, some courses are being removed and then not really being replaced. For instance, there's a big concern with the removal of history, the study of history from the universities. Even, I think maybe it was removed and later replaced, but I don't know. But my challenge is that is being threatened, and then we are suspecting that why would you want to remove history from the studies of the school? And then, so in your opinion, if it is brought under humanities, for instance, people who study history now are called history and strategic studies or history and diplomatic studies. I mean, so what kind of threats could that be to the people?
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Prof. Su. I'm Ayanda Simayi from Nelson Mandela University. I just want an explanation from Prof about this important point which struck me so closely, the decolonial repair, where the center is in fact mandated, not supposed, mandated to move to the margins and bring the margins to the center. I have my own explanation, but I would love to hear Prof. It's so profound. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take those three. So firstly, what can we do about Palestine? Given that archives, and indeed all the 12 universities have been bombed. It's not just the universities, of course, which usually hold and there are also official archives. And it is by erasing people's past, this is why it's a genocide. By erasing people's possibility to remember the past, it erases people's possibility to create a livable future. So what can we do? I think we can learn a lot from those who have already survived. Yeah? For example, in Timbuktu, where families, scholars, and so on have conserved what archives they can by hiding them in houses, by creating a network, and after that, then there can be collaboration between different scholars, between archivists, librarians, literary studies, religious studies, scientific studies, mathematical studies, to help our colleagues. So please let us find out if our colleagues are still alive and offer them what help we can. Because I think that's the most that we can do, and the least is the least that we can do. And, well, also, I don't know. I mean, we all are, more than 1 year later, we are all just, I don't know. I mean, shattered by what has happened. But this happens when anybody's history is destroyed in such a way, and anybody's future is targeted in such a truly cruel and appalling manner. So the second question was about, I can't remember now, somebody rhyme me. No, please remind me. History. Oh, yes, history. Sorry, Professor. Yes, about what is being targeted. And again, the targeting, scholasticide, the targeting of universities and the targeting of subjects like history, is a really serious problem. Because when they start targeting our subjects, that's why, while bringing the margins to the center, we still need to hold our disciplines, because that is our job in academia. In public academia, we have a public duty to hold the center, even while it has to be taken apart by decolonization. We hold some kind of center. So when they abolish your social and political theory course, when they abolish your humanities programs, when they abolish your history programs and say they should be, you could replace them with history of diplomacy or business history or organizational studies. It appalls me how unable our colleagues and managers are to prevent this from happening. And we have to be much more proactive and not fall into this trap of liberal fatalism. And learning more about this, bringing the margins to the center, I have 3 articles. They're open access, they're mostly ready to go, and I'll send them to you. They'll be ready. One of them is already published in Irish Journal of Sociology in a special issue on decolonizing academia, and there are 2 others. But yes, if you just look for my name, they will be the 2024, So that's the best that I can do, Any more? Any questions online? There's another question down here. Come. Because we don't have a roving mic, sister, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Prof, for your submission, and all those who have been journeying with us in this very important agenda. Since the first day, when we've been hearing about decolonization, a lot has been going on in my mind. First, let me tell you my names. I'm Joan Atimango, currently a student pursuing PhD in East African School of Higher Education Studies and Development. Thinking about the term colonial, I think I was meant to believe, because I started thinking about our great African countries, and Egypt clicked in my mind. I tried to find the history of Egypt. As they are talking about history, it was very important. I realized Egypt was colonized by the British. And to me, I've been thinking of Egypt being great, but when I went to read about it, there's a part where the British termed Egypt as feminist, because when they won the war, they termed Egypt to be like a female. Now, in that case, colonialism and decolonization, I would look at it at a perspective of not just the Western world or the African world, but I looked at colonialism as a mindset of an oppressor. If someone is African but oppressive, in that case, that is a colonialist. And if in education our mindset is termed to waiting to be deliberated by someone else, then we are still colonized within ourselves even when we are scholars. And in that case, I felt like decolonization would start with you and me, would start with me and you back home with our children who today think that the best education is when they are flown to study abroad. What is abroad? If we can improve our own selves, our own thinking, but like when you go back home right now, what setup do you put for yourself? Where do you and I apportion ourselves? If we can have that mindset that, yes, I can do it, I can make it, then we are decolonized. It's not about the structure. Of course, the structures were built. But when I look at Egypt, which is the source of civilization in the world, these structures probably originated from Egypt. They are not so much, I can't term them as colonial, but there was somebody who needed to build them at that time. Therefore, I can't destroy the structure in order to say that I'm decolonizing, but my mindset, now, home, everywhere I go, am I liberated? Am I bringing life or I'm destroying life? I submit.
I don't think that requires much of a response, but maybe simply to distinguish colonization from a civilization, because Egypt was a great civilization, like the other great civilizations of the world, and the Eurocentric or Western modern imperial colonial civilization is one kind of civilization. All civilizations created culture and greatness, but they were also founded on immense amounts of oppression and extraction and injustice. So I guess we have to make, as you say, it's not the job of the margins to come to the center, where is abroad, but it is maybe the time for the center to go to the margins, and for the margins to have more productive conversations with each other.
The last question.
Thank you, Prof. As you were presenting on reducing and cutting programs in humanities, something came to my mind that in an era where we have reduced education to employment, how do we harmonize the humanity programs and employability in our societies? Thank you.
Well, I'm an educationist, and I'm a higher educationist. So I believe two things about higher education. One, that it should be higher, something difficult to attain, something more, and it should be educational, which means that it should be directed to the full development of the human personality, as is each and every person's right. Employability is an important goal that is ascribed to education, but employability for what? So I think it's also important for, it is the case that the humanities, in a situation of an outgoing tide of funding and support, that the humanities have resorted to the employability argument, because today we have many technologies and a civilizational mode of production which requires humans to produce content for the information and communication and digital technology corporations. And this means that we do need workers to work in the factories of knowledge and industries of creativity. However, this is not what knowledge and creativity are for. And I think that the Afrocentric development of the humanities is to rehumanize the Afrocentric world in an Afrocentric way, and to help the rest of the world to rehumanize itself through the dialogues and enrichment of Afrocentric humanistic paradigms, rather than merely employability, though I do agree that there's a strong argument being made for the employability prospects of those in the humanities who, after all, are the best at creating the content that will populate the platforms.
Thank you so much, Prof. Sue, for that elaborate presentation and the questions that you have managed to answer very well. Another hand clap.